Trevor here. I hope you can hear me because we're having a fine Scottish summer just now. Well, okay, not summer, spring. But usually this time of the year, well, a lot of the time, this time of the year, it's sunnier, it's warmer, it's drier. But today, as you can see, it's duller. I'll just do a very quick sweep around so you can see I'm near an industrial estate here. This is the airfield somewhere in sunny Scotland. At least you can see me, so you know it's sunny. Well, the sun is trying its best. This is Scotland. If you love this kind of weather, come to Scotland. You'll get it in abundance, especially the northeast of Scotland. Further inland, it's a lot drier and a lot warmer and a lot sunnier, more like just ideal temperatures for a holiday, you know, not too hot, not too cold. Here, it's cold. I mean, I'm not wearing gloves and my fingers are feeling it. Anyway, this is not a weather update, just in case you're thinking I was reporting for CNN or BBC or anything like that. This is a continuation of what we've been talking about with respect to the rapture. Like I mentioned a few videos ago, the rapture is a pretty big subject. Not because we're trying to stretch it out, but because for something that is mentioned in such a small, minuscule, almost obscure fashion in the Bible, it is such a big subject to unpack, especially when you start to consider the controversies, you start to consider the confusions, you start to consider the various things that cause people a lot of confusion. The reason why I have this on, I could take it off. Oh, the wind has calmed down a bit, so I can take it off because the wind was causing plenty of noise. I can still hear the wind, so let me put it back on, just in case that influences what you guys hear as well. I'd like for you guys to hear me clearly, not because I want to hide genuine, original, crisp Scottish weather. Anyway, so like I was saying, we've been talking about the rapture. In my first rant, I talked about how, you know, people make it look like the rapture is a 200-year-old doctrine and it's not biblical and so on. And in particular, I'm talking about the pre-tribulation rapture. So I know I've already, but just by mentioning that, I've alienated all those who do not believe in the rapture, number one. And number two, all those who do not believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. And as you might know already, whether you believe it or not, there are many schools of thought, many different camps of people with regard to the rapture. There's about, you have those who believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, post-tribulation rapture, mid-tribulation rapture. And then there are those who do not believe in the rapture at all. Believers are going to go through the tribulation, end of story, Jesus Christ is going to come back, the end. I'm not going to go through all of that because, in part because we don't have the time, and in part because I've already treated that before. What I'm going to talk about very quickly, as much as I can, very quickly, is to explain why I mentioned John chapter 14 in the first rant, okay? So remember when I talked about the first rant with regard to the rapture, I mentioned a number of scriptures, 2 Corinthians 12, 1 Thessalonians 4, the book of Revelation, Genesis 5, and then I also mentioned John 14. And you're probably wondering, why on earth did he mention John chapter 14? After all, John chapter 14 tells us, Jesus said, you believe in the Father, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Behold, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you may be also. This hand's getting tired, so I've transferred to my left hand. Now, he said, in my Father's house, there are many mansions, or there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you, behold, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you may be also. And, you know, that scripture almost sounds innocuous, and you start to wonder why. The disciples never ask any questions. See, the disciples, they help us a lot. What do I mean by that? Sometimes when the disciples don't understand something, they would ask Jesus to explain, like the parables, for example. And Jesus would tell them why he was telling them about the parables. I'm not going to go into that. That's a big subject by itself. Maybe one day I'll do something on parables. But in this case, they did not ask any questions. And what many do not realize is that Jesus was alluding to the rapture in there in John chapter 14. And I'll explain. In Jewish and in particular Galilean custom, and if you notice, his disciples were Galileans, right? In Galilean custom, this is what happens when a guy is shadowing a damsel and he wants to marry her. Shadowing is just a term we use from way back in Nigeria, where we talk about a guy looking at a damsel from a distance. Oh gosh, another term I use a lot, damsel, simply young woman, okay? I'm not medieval, it's just the term I use. Anyway, so when a guy likes a woman and he wants to marry her, the traditional way they go about this is that it's the dad who organizes the wedding. And so the son goes with an entourage to the proposed bride's house. And he presents her in the company of his entourage with many witnesses a cup of wine. Or a glass of wine. Well, they didn't use glasses back in those days. They used porcelain material like mud, you know, and they would make cups from it and bowls and so on. Anyway, he present her with a cup of wine. And then the only person who could decide whether she took that cup of wine or not was the bride. The groom did not decide. The groom had to offer it, knowing full well that he could receive a no, a rejection, but he couldn't force it. All he could do was present the cup of wine as a symbol of his love and a symbol of his commitment to her, wanting to marry her. The bride's father could not decide for the bride to take the cup. The bride's mother could not decide for her to take the cup. The bride's siblings could not decide. The bride's uncle, the patriarch of the family, the matriarch of the family, regardless of who was oldest, could not decide. The only person who could decide, I keep calling her the bride, the proposed bride, the one who was being proposed, was the only one who could decide whether to take the cup or not. And if she took the cup, what would then happen is that if she took the cup and drank it, that was literally her saying, yes, I will marry you. If, on the other hand, she pushed it back into the proposed bridegroom's hand, that was her saying, no, I will not marry you, for whatever reason. It could be because she didn't like him. It could be because she did not believe in him. It could be because she didn't think he was handsome enough. It could be because she didn't think he was wealthy enough. For whatever reason, whether it was through ignorance or through willful decision-making, she could reject his proposal of marriage. If she rejected his proposal for marriage, then he walked away, perhaps went to lick his wounds. Maybe, you never know, he might try again, or maybe his pride says to him, nah, never try again. You know, she can assign her to the annals of history. I'm not getting involved with her again. But let us assume that she took the cup and said, yes, I will marry you. What then that meant was that she would then, so there would be a bit of a small celebration to celebrate the engagement. So that was the engagement. In the Hebrew, that engagement is called the Ketubah. It's a betrothal. Interestingly, in Nigeria, we have something somewhat similar. We'll call it the traditional wedding, where the bridegroom goes to the bride's house and makes an appeal to the parents of the bride for her hand in marriage. And then, bizarrely, then they would have, the following day on a Sunday, they'll have what they call the white wedding in church. I used to call it, Friday had the black wedding, and Sunday had, or Saturday had the white wedding. And then on the Sunday, they would have a Thanksgiving. Anyway, I digress. The point is, there was a small celebration, and after that small celebration, what would happen? I think things have died down a bit, so maybe I can take this off. What would happen as a result of the small celebration was that the groom would then go back to his father's house. Him and his entourage would depart. The groom would go back to his father's house while the bride stayed in her own father's house, waiting for the groom to return to take her home. Now here's where things get very interesting. And you're probably wondering, why is he talking about John chapter 14 in this context? when the groom went back to his father's house, he went and built for her a home for both of them in his father's house. He went back home and built a home for himself and his bride in his father's house. So at this point, he's engaged to her, but he has not yet married her. He has not had the full wedding ceremony. He has not yet slept with her. They have not yet had sexual intercourse, because all there is at this point is a commitment to marriage. They don't have they have not yet had a wedding, because up until now, all he has done is make a commitment. He has to go and prepare a home for her. So he goes back to his father's house and begins to construct. Here's where things also get even more interesting. Only the father can determine that the house is now complete. Only the father can determine that, yes, son, your house is ready, go get your bride. The son could not determine it. The servants or the building contractors could not determine it. The only person who could determine that the house or the home for the bride and his groom was ready, for the bridegroom and his bride, that the house was ready, was the father. And then whenever the father gave his certificate of completion to his son to say, right, son, go get your bride, then the son, with eagerness and with joy, probably chomping at the bit for months or weeks, or perhaps maybe just days, will then go and get his bride with pomp and pageantry. But meanwhile, all this time, the bride does not know when her fiancé is coming back. She has no idea that when he's coming back. It's like an open contract, an open commitment. She knows he's going to come back, but she does not know when he's going to come back. She does not know when he's going to come back. Apologies if the video is a bit blurry and so on. I can't control the weather element, so sorry for that. But hopefully you can hear me, and that's really kind of what matters. The bride is supposed to live in holiness and chastity without, getting involved in all sorts of illicit relationships with any other man until the commitment is fulfilled. The commitment to marry her bridegroom, the commitment to marry her fiancé. As a result of the Ketubah, they would have undertaken a few weeks or months or perhaps maybe up to a year or a year and a half before. I don't know. The time kind of differs or changes and so on and so forth. But when he comes back, it's always a surprise. There is not a warning to say when he's coming back. Why? Because it's only the dad who can say, son, go get your bride. It's time, your house is complete. Why am I mentioning all this? Because this is what Jesus was referring to in John chapter 14. Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions. Behold, I go to prepare a place for you. If it were not so, I would have told you. And I will come back to receive you unto myself, that where I am, you may be also. That where I am, you may be also. Jesus was referring to the rapture there. Now, there's something else I want to say, but I'll say it in a different video because this has gotten long enough already. Suffice to say that John 14 alludes to the rapture, but I'm going to mention something with regard to Abraham, Isaac, Rebecca, Eliezer, and the church, and Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, and the Father in the next video. I'll be back shortly. God bless you.